Hey everyone, Amy Wood, joined by Jim Stritzinger. He is working right now to help South Carolina solve its broadband challenges. And that's kind of putting it mildly, right? Because there's a lot of people who need to connect.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. I'm glad to join you this afternoon. And it's a big challenge here in South Carolina. And the work I did last fall, there's actually 435,000 residents was our estimate last fall. People that don't have connectivity, almost 10% of the population doesn't have access to the internet. And of course, we're keenly aware of that right now with everything that's going on in the world, but it's clearly a problem we have to fix.
And this is really coming out in play and coming to the attention of a lot of people now because of the pandemic that we're in and this challenge to connect, to do your schoolwork, to work remotely. I mean, there's so many reasons. Telehealth.
It is, and clearly, internet's the platform by which quality of life is delivered in South Carolina for so many people right now. So, doing everything we can to get that right is really, really important. And fortunately, and I know we're going to talk about this, is really neat, is we're doing really state of the art stuff in here in South Carolina to understand the problem, because that's really the big issue. If you're a community leader trying to fix it, the first part of it is understanding where the problem truly is at a detailed level. So we've done some really unique things, and I'm excited to show you. And I gave you some little sample maps we're going to take a look at. But really, the way I do the work is at a census block level, and that's very important. And there's a lot of census blocks in South Carolina. There's 181,908. So
Whoa.
it's kind of nerdy, but at each census block level, we take a look at the level of service that's available and the number of people that live there. So, and that's what the maps really refer to, is getting your handle at a census block level where we have service and where we have challenges, so we can, ultimately bring an engineer in to fix the problem.
Now, let's talk a little bit about who you're working with and how this mapping that you're doing. Because what you're doing, there's a thing called speed test. A lot of us have done this where we're like trying to figure out, is my internet really as fast as they tell me it is? And there's this free website you can go to, or an app called Speed Test. I'm going to put a little image of it up so people can kind of see what I'm talking about in case they've never done it before. But Jim, this is really important, right? Because every time somebody runs one of these speed tests, that's data that you are accessing and you can put on your maps.
Exactly right. And Amy, thanks for sharing that with all your viewers. So many people that I meet, they kind of wave their arms helplessly, saying my internet's awful. And I try to get them to change gears and have precise engineering level detail. And that's what the speed test app is all about, is taking the discussion from kind of a subjective to a very quantitative discussion. And what your viewers will see when they use the app is they get a download speed and an upload speed. And the reason that's so important is because that sets the quality of service that you have. So if you're a student and you're trying to do your homework, you need enough speed that you can actually stream a video. And if you're a resident and you're just trying to get a telehealth visit and get a diagnosis from a doctor, you also need a good quality of service so the doctor can actually see you without the video breaking up and things like that. So typically the way that you get a good quality of internet service is by having speed. That's kind of the measure. And
And
that's what
this
the app is all about. Yes, I'm
Right.
sorry.
And the speed that people need is what? Like what are we really looking for to say that you truly have a decent connection?
So fortunately, the Federal Communications Commission has defined speed for us. And it's, again, defined in download, upload speed. So 25 megabits per second download speed, 3 megabits per second upload speed is the federal designation for federal measurement for whether you have internet, good quality internet at home or not.
And when it comes to these maps and what we're trying to figure out for the state of South Carolina, you are working right now with all the providers. Like, so you're teamed up with the providers, the government. Explain how this is working and who's at work to fix the problem.
Well, it's been a wonderful collaboration, and it started in the fall with the healthcare community and the South Carolina Hospital Association and the Office of Rural Health and Palmetto Care Connections came to me and said, "Hey, can we get this started? Because we're seeing a huge need from the healthcare community to deploy telehealth." And it got even stronger in January when, based on our previous work, the providers came together, the South Carolina Telecommunications and Broadband Association, which is really the big internet service providers in the state of South Carolina. They said, hey, Jim, we love what you're doing and we want to take it to the next level. So what's been really great about that is now the provider community is not only helping out with funding, which I'm of course grateful for as an entrepreneur, but they provided data. So I've always been limited by quality of data from the Federal Communications Commission. It's always been old. So what's really neat right now, and the maps I just shared with you, um, all of the members of the South Carolina Telecommunications and Broadband Association, 13 of them, have voluntarily contributed their 1231 data to this project, whereas the best available public data right now is June 30 last year. So it's really unique. And I'm really been honored.
Just sorry to stop you, but what is 1230 data? What is that?
1231, excuse me, I'm sorry. Every 6 months, each internet service provider is required to report to the Federal Communications Commission the level of service that they provide at a census block level.
Got it.
So that's just a federal requirement. So what I've always been limited by is waiting on the FCC to publish data and get it out to me so I can map it for the state. So in this case, we've short-circuited that whole process, and I don't have to wait for the FCC to publish. The South Carolina Telecommunications and Broadband Association members are giving it to me directly before it's publicly available. And it's really coming together right now. We started this back in January, not knowing the crisis that we'd be in now. But because of the support, we have an extraordinary tool that's coming really in the nick of time to help all of the elected officials and state leaders have really accurate data.
Will this be a game to win it? In other words, we've talked before about how it's going to take federal funding to really get us to where we need to be on top of all these, providers investing. Will this put us ahead of the game? In other words, because you're using the speed test data, and I think you said that we are the only state in the nation doing that right now. So you have that real-time data, you have the providers cooperating. Will that put us at the front of the line looking for money?
Well, it certainly equips us to do a much better job. A lot of the federal grants require that you articulate exclusively at a census block level where you plan to build internet service. So if you want to get money from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is a primary funder, you have to say census block 1, 2, and 3 are where I'm going to go. So by having these maps ready, prepared, and available, the providers are only allowed to get USDA money for census blocks that have a service level below a certain threshold. So by having this already done, they can reference my maps, and I can share detail with them at a GIS level, which is really important. I mean, Geographic Information Services, GIS, that mapping. I can hand very detailed information to the engineering staff that they can use that as a leap off point to make a grant.
And when it comes to the speed test part of this, really every South Carolinian, if they really want to see broadband improve, could help by running the tests.
Absolutely. And so what I do is I take the federal data as a bottoms up, and then I use the speed test data to validate on the top down, because you've got providers reporting in one thing, but we want to make sure it's accurate. So we're the only state that has the ability to do this, and it's a very unique. I'm grateful for UCLA's participation in South Carolina, and Congressman Clyburn's really happy about this too, because of course it's his home state, and for us to be doing something state of the art like this is really extraordinary, and it takes a lot of work.
And you've gone to DC and presented some of the early maps. Not the ones that we're seeing today, but the early maps. I want to show the first map is the areas of need map. I'm going to pull that up on the screen. But Jim, this is a big deal, right? Being able to map out and show where the problem lies.
Exactly.
So talk a little bit about this map. I've got it up on the screen right now with you.
Great. So the areas of need map is really two maps in one, Amy, and it's fun to talk about this because sometimes I refer to it as the green map, and we referred to this earlier, that the green is 25.3 for the Federal Communications Commission. In other words, the areas, everything you see on the map that's green meets the FCC criteria being 25.3 or better. And while we're talking about the green, You also see some really dark green areas on the map. Those are areas where the Ookla speed test data is validating at the census block level that we have extraordinary service. So those dark green areas are the fastest places in the state of South Carolina. And then when the map is not green, so now the other part of the equation is now we need to understand where the homes are so that we can bring an engineer out and actually solve the problem. So when the map is not green, you can kind of train your eye to look at those really dark red and dark orange spots on the map. That's where the household density is very high and the internet service doesn't meet expectations.
Wow.
Those are the places we have to fix, and there's a lot of them.
Yes, you can see that on the map. What's it going to take to fix this?
Really great engineering. There's no magic. Even if you set money aside, it takes brilliant engineers coming out and actually fixing the problem. So, that's really what we have to do. So it's a combination of getting federal subsidy. Hopefully the state's going to inject some money into the equation to help really propel this. But we need great engineering teams, and that's why I'm so happy to be working with the state's best broadband providers, the members of the Telecommunications and Broadband Association, because with these maps, they can now deploy their teams in parallel around the state to get the job done.
All right, let's take a look at the other map that you've provided. This is the South Carolina's best available technology map as it stands right now. So, Jim, what are we looking at here? What does this one mean?
Well, this is a unique feature of the way I've analyzed the state is taking a look at, we had a little dialogue on this, the type of technology that you bring into your home determines how fast you can go. So there's really 4 different ways to bring internet service into a family home. You can bring it in with fiber. You can bring it in with a cable modem. You can bring it in with what's known as DSL service, the copper telephone lines. And you can also bring internet service in with wireless. And this is not Wi-Fi service. This is known as fixed wireless. So as you look at the state map, I'll point those out. The fiber first is the all black areas. You see those leap off the page?
Mm-hmm.
That's where fiber is available around the state of South Carolina. The blue areas are where cable modem is available. And there's different shades of cable modem there reflecting the type of technology. The copper colored areas are different flavors of DSL service, copper phone lines. And the aqua area is really where you see fixed wireless being available in the state of South Carolina. And that is really a state-of-the-art technology for bringing internet service into rural communities, because instead of having to dig up roads and bury fiber in trenches, you might be able to get a wireless signal to a house much faster than you could build to an individual home.
And that's really important, right? To figure out ways to do this that aren't as expensive as starting from scratch. Because if we were to start from scratch, it's probably, what did you estimate, $1 billion problem?
Oh, it can be, it's a big number. If you just do some simple math, the federal subsidy to connect one home in the USDA program ranges from $5,000 to $8,000. It's very expensive to bring internet service into rural, sparsely populated rural communities. But not just the expense of it, it's the time of it. We have I like to say this, we have 6-year-old children growing up in homes. If we take 10 years to reach that home, we now have a 16-year-old child in the house that's never had internet. So time is of the essence. So it's obvious that if we can get a wireless signal to a home, we're going to do that much more rapidly than we could get a wired connection to a house. But I like to think fixed wireless provides a bridge to a wired future. That's how I'm looking at it.
I think the really disturbing thing on that map, though, as I pull it back up full, is the pink. Because the pink is telling us there's literally no internet service.
Yep. And that reflects places where the internet service is either not available at all. And that means a resident of South Carolina picks up the phone and they call to get internet service and they can't get it. This has nothing to do with affordability, by the way. This means they can't get it if they live there. But I'll also point out this is also a level of service that is less than 3 megabits per second download speed, 768K upload speed. It's not, in this day and age, that service doesn't even count. So all of those areas that are pink on the map really leaps off the page. Those are our major problem spots in the state.
That is incredible to look at and to think about. So there are a lot of folks that are talking about innovative solutions. That is, there is some infrastructure out there that isn't being used to connect people that potentially could be, some through the rural electric cooperatives. We've heard talk about like old television towers. I mean,
Yes.
Tell us about some of these pieces that might be the way to fill in the gaps.
So what I'm trying to share is a creative way of thinking about telecom. So there's lots of little things that can be done along the way. For example, when your community has a water and sewer project, you might not think about it, but that's a perfect opportunity to drop some conduit into the existing project and pave the way for fiber to come in the future. Something like that, just taking advantage of an open road is one thing. To your point, broadly, these are categorized as vertical assets. If you want to bring fixed wireless into a community, you have to have a tall place to mount an antenna. So you look at water towers, you look at tall buildings. And when you think about going through a rural community, you don't have a lot of tall assets to work with. But we need to teach our elected officials and community leaders how to think differently about their community, because the ones that can figure out how to fix telecom are the ones that are going to win the game long term. You can't, it's hard to imagine being an entrepreneur and going into a community that has no internet. We need to do this. So you can leverage your water towers. You can leverage, we've talked a little bit about this, South Carolina Educational Television for many years did an amazing job of extending distance learning around the state using microwave towers. And so we have a whole collection of microwave towers around the state that are located physically on school district property, but they're not being used at the level they could be. So we're looking at some creative ways to repurpose those towers. And a good example of that is I was talking to the Department of Education and the leadership at Department Ed, Superintendent Spearman, and the others. But we're looking at how those towers might be used to provide Wi-Fi service. So instead of having an antenna low to the ground, could we mount an antenna higher up on one of those ETV towers and provide a broader umbrella of Wi-Fi service? So Wi-Fi is very different than fixed wireless. I mentioned before, Wi-Fi has a range of about 500 yards, depending on where the antenna is mounted. Fixed wireless, in contrast, can go about 3 miles. Okay. So if we get fixed wireless deployed, and that is, by the way, the state of the art that both AT&T and CenturyLink are using in South Carolina to deploy in rural communities, because they put the antennas way high up on their cellular platforms, their big cell towers, and they have an additional antenna array. And then you actually have a receiving dish on the side of your house, and that's how you receive a signal for fixed wireless.
Well, we're really honored that you would choose to debut your maps with us, because it's pretty cool to see this work that's underway. And these will be maps. How many more maps? I mean, like what else is coming since you've just gotten this little taste here?
It's really great to give you a little taste. So I'm working we're going to do maps of all 46 counties. Oh, this is kind of a first taste of the statewide look. I wanted to give that to everybody. But and the beautiful thing is we'll have a map each county, but also where we were 6 months ago when we did the fall versus where we are now. So each viewer is going to be able to log in, and we'll do another interview, and I'll tell you all about that. But you'll be able to log in and download the map set for the county that you're interested in and see where we were versus where we are now with all the numbers. So you'll see residents and households in the community. I think it's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to sharing it.
And we were noting as we looked at the green map that showed us the overlays of where the speed tests have been done and where the data shows that it's kind of backing up what the providers are telling you.
Yes.
But there are a lot of places where you need people to run them. In other words, you need folks running wireless and internet connection opportunities, speed tests out in the rural communities, right?
Absolutely. So if your viewers can all figure out how to get that speed test app, or you can just do it from your browser, you can go to speedtest.net. But if your viewers can all do that, that's a big help, because in the rural communities, we don't have a lot of data to work with. Um, Downtown Greenville and Charleston and Columbia, those areas are pretty well tested, but in the rural areas, we need some help. So when your viewers are using the mobile app and they're at home and they're on their home Wi-Fi, they're testing the fixed infrastructure of their home. But when they're out and about and they run, when they're shopping in the mall and they run a speed test, now they're testing their mobile phone and how fast that is. So Ookla is also working with me on that. We don't have those maps done yet, but that's chapter 2. And I'm going to be mapping the cellular service of South Carolina as well. And I don't know that that's been done in the U.S. before. So we are really doing some state-of-the-art things here.
That's pretty exciting, right? Like South Carolina likes to shine when it can in new and different ways. And this really would put us on the map, pun intended, for being a leader in this process.
Well, it's very difficult to do. I'm really, as an entrepreneur, I'm really proud of the work that we've done and to pull this together. And it's been an incredible honor to work with Congressman Clyburn and some of the leadership, and to take this methodology and really present it to multiple members of Congress and to create awareness at that level has been extraordinary. So we're on to something special, and the world's paying attention. And it's nice to, as a resident of South Carolina, I'm not a doctor or nurse, so I can't help out on the front line of the healthcare. So my hat off to all them. But what I can do is help our state understand our capabilities on the broadband side, and that's hopefully my contribution to lifting up the state.
That's pretty exciting. What do you think if you look into your magic ball of the future and fortune tell us a little bit about what it will take and how long it will take? How long do you think it will take South Carolina to really get wired everywhere?
Well, I think it's legit to have I think a 5-year time frame to get everybody connected, I think, is very legitimate to talk about. And I just can't think how proud we will all be to go from the crisis we're in now and seeing how disconnected everybody is to go to 100% connected. I can't think of anything better we can do to lift up the state from so many different dimensions. And I, it would be the honor of my lifetime to help make that happen. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, we've called our report the digital divide, and if we connect, the divide disappears, at least on one level.
It does, and we lift up our economy. It puts South Carolina on the global economic stage to connect all of our residents, and we probably haven't seen anything like this, an opportunity, since the 30s. When we, in a good historical perspective, is looking to the 30s when we collected electricity to rural farms. And, it's an identical experience. History is really repeating itself. And I like to refer to this as the next greatest thing, because there's a wonderful book, great historical reference. It's called The Next Greatest Thing, which was about documenting that 50-year anniversary of bringing electricity for rural America. And you can imagine what farm life was before and after. Sure. And as we sit here today, can you imagine life on a U.S. farm without electricity? It's I can't even comprehend it. And hopefully, 50 years from now, we won't be able to comprehend life without the internet, without connected households. So I think that's really the perspective we can look forward. It was expensive then, sure. Back in the 30s. Pushing electricity was exactly the same challenge, but I'm very, very hopeful. We've done it before. We can do it again. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of muscle, a lot of creativity, but we've got it in this country, and we're going to get it done.
Jim, thank you so much for spending time opening our eyes to this issue. Appreciate it.
Happy. Thanks, Amy.